You? No.
All right. All right. So if I speak, then yep. How does this look for you, Amadea? Can you speak again? You're muted now, I think.
Can you hear me now?
Very well. No echo.
Great.
Yeah, I just have, maybe if you can, I just have, I have to mute one to unmute the other one.
Okay.
If you're overlapping and do a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have a remote speak for this session, so it should be. Yeah.
Abdina can raise the questions if there are some questions online, so she
Yep.
can be the potential speakers.
Yeah, if you want to do it, Amadea, if there's questions online, you can just say it. Just and we'll have you minimized as a participant, so I didn't focus screen on us, right? But you're
Okay.
still visible in the corner.
Great. And I
because we can only have one sound on at the same time.
Right.
So you need to put your and signal that there is a question online.
Did you hear that?
no, I hear like a very. I don't hear like very clearly.
Let us know when there are questions popping up, and you can state that questions, and we will put it on the stage.
Yeah.
Okay. So whenever there's a question, I read them aloud, and you put me like. All right.
That should work.
Yes.
Anyway.
Nowadays you can check both the OSR and podcast.
I don't know. Do you know if you did you also need to check the OGBM app?
No.
Selma? Selma is doing that.
Okay.
So check the chat here. Okay.
Okay, great.
It should work. We need to do quite a bit of editing.
I don't see here a question and answer box. Is that okay? It's just the chat.
It's already live.
If I try something, we can make a window bigger. Maybe the PowerPoints would be
Sure. It's, so this is not that screen, right? This is a separate screen.
okay, it's the here.
Not doing the computers. It's very difficult.
I see. There is.
Sorry. Excellent. Yes. Yeah. Let's see what she was going to do again.
Me?
Oh, well done. Oh, no worries. Yeah. So again, you signed up for helping out with the AP, right? Right. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. So Amadea is joining us online to monitor any questions that are online. Here you have a remote control.
Okay.
You can maybe also sit here and monitor what's going on online and see if Amadea wants to say something.
Yeah.
So when she's raising her hand,
She's
for
one of
example-
the panel speakers.
no, she's not. But
okay.
she's
So what did she say? Just
she's raising her hand, and
Okay.
you can tell Jean. Also, you have a camera here, over there,
okay.
and
Let's move it.
you can move it. Sometimes maybe zoom in on
Whoever's talking.
whoever's talking.
Okay.
So just sit down.
Sure.
We'll
Thank you.
be around. Yeah.
Okay. So how do Amanda want to talk? What do I do to make her? Oh, okay. I can say that first. Okay.
Amadea can just talk, I think.
Okay.
Amadea, can you say something?
It's not.
Oh, all right. You turned it off.
I just noticed you have twice the software open, right?
Yeah.
That's where we have feedback.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
can we mute one of the two?
We should be able to, I would say, right? So I can mute definitely
I didn't
this
know
one.
it was possible, so
Yeah.
I got my table.
Yeah. But for some reason, I can't mute this one. This one isn't actually recording any sound. This one is not recording any sound. Let's play.
So I just let you know that you hear it and
Let's see. Can I?
tell you guys or change the sound okay. Great. Okay. That's my job. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, okay. Do we have enough? Should I check 60 or?
Alex.
Nice to meet
Hey,
you.
great to meet you. Or no? Are you from? Oh, okay, but you're organizing this. Maybe you had been mentioned on an email or something. Your name. Yeah, your name was on. Sure, wonderful.
Do you have a USB pen drive? He needs to borrow.
Yeah, I have one.
We'll get one for you.
Okay, thank you. Why do you need to?
I'm doing the sponsor.
Hey, Tom, what do you? Maybe I have something. What do you need?
I have a slide on here. I mean, I guess the presentation is here, but also I don't have the
I think I might have.
Yes.
Is it better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it might not be this one.
I tried side.
This one.
Power.
This one. Yeah.
Let's try it again.
Oh, you got it.
The window because it says site. So I'm not sure if it will act on. Anyway.
Yeah, we're trying. Test, test, test. That works. Do you hear us, Amadena? Yeah. Can you speak? Can you say something? Excellent.
Yeah. Aim. Right. I'm glad you made it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I know it's a pleasure.
Yeah.
To be here.
It's a very important issue.
How
How you doing?
Right. Nice to meet you. Oh, happy to. Sorry if I was a bit late.
Oh, it's still good now. I might see you.
Because I was talking with Alan about the grad interest.
Yes, that's why I took my bag. But only my bag. Right?
Yes, Alex.
Nice to meet you. Where are you coming in from? Where?
Do you know the
I don't know.
Funny enough, all this way. Nice talk. It's nice meeting yesterday. No, but it was good discussion, just to understand. You know, it took me to get back to the address. Where they're going.
I don't see anything right now.
Case. We can also put the camera on, so it's there.
Wow, fancy technology.
Yeah, that's why it goes wrong. So this should work. Right, Amadea, you can still hear us?
Yes.
Great,
In Western Canada, doing my grad school. I worked there as an adjunct for a while. Then, of course, funding situations change, and then I came, I'd say, back to Montreal.
Half hour, right?
Yeah, but it's not working.
I'm moving. The Tom is on screen, so I think it's all right.
Yeah, but I can't move to anyone else. So if you want me to show anyone else,
Okay. There should be no questions session for the session, so. Yeah.
but again, and I can't see on that. So how do I do it? If you want? I am sitting here. I'm confused.
Because here is a sponsor session, and they have so how do I know if you want to
I can see her in here.
Yeah, but how do I know? Later,
She will just raise her hand there in this small video.
yeah. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the panel 4 of the OSR activities. I'm the moderator today. My name is Jing. I'm from Academia Sinica, Taiwan. Before we start our sessions today, we are pleased to have our sponsor, Tom, to give a brief presentation. Okay, so it's welcome, Tom.
Hi there. So on the behalf of the Wellcome Center for Integrative Neuroscience, we're very proud to be a sponsor of the Open Science Room. And so I'm just going to take 5 minutes to tell you a little bit about with the WIN group at Oxford. So next slide. So what do? We are, next slide, please. The Wellcome Integrative Center for Integrative Neuroscience exists to combine 3 different themes of research. First is cross-species integration, trying to learn about the neural structure across different species to see how they relate to each other. Next, cross-scale relationships. We have people who are looking at microstructure in postmortem brains, in living humans, and then also at the third thing is at the biobank scale. So then how do we take these insights and translate them into a large-scale population? These are the 3 themes that WIN tries to integrate. Next. And then as well as integrating clinical investigations. Next slide. So what are we? WIN is special because you may have heard of the Center for Functional Magnetic Resonance Imaging in the Brain, FMRIB, but WIN is not FMRIB. WIN is more than FMRIB. WIN was an effort to integrate FMRIB with two other groups across the campus. FMRIB was originally founded in 1997 by these sort of esteemed academics. It was led by Paul Matthews, and then carried on by Irene Tracy, and now we're led by Heidi Johansson Berg. Next slide. So we're in Oxford. Next slide. And just to emphasize the fact that we are these three different sites. So this is what makes WIN special, is that we have the FMRIB site, which has this longstanding established oh God, there's a video there. Expertise in magnetic resonance imaging of the brain, but it's combined with the OBA, the Center for I forget what it stands for, but it's where there's MEG expertise, and it's on the campus of our psychiatric hospital. And then in the center of town, we have the people who do the animal models, where they're scanning in the Department of Experimental Psychology. So it's really kind of cool that all these different people talk to each other and interact with each other. To skip, yeah, that's great. Okay. So just to stress these three different groups. Yeah, over 300 people. Next. These are some of the people that are involved, some of the PIs. I think I can just flash through this. We have these. Next slide, please. Yep. We have both 3T and 7T scanners, MEG, and brain stimulation. Again, all these different tools brought together across campus. Okay. It's also important that one of these is two of these centers are on clinical campuses. So one is in the psychiatric hospital, and the FMRIB center is on the NHS hospital for Oxford. So we're plugged into all these and try to make sure that the work we're doing can have an impact clinically. Next slide. And the other thing I'm actually really proud about is that we really stress these values and WIN, that we're inclusive, open, engaged, and as a team. So just next slide. So we have a champion who works on public engagement. We work with patient networks and also with lots of science training activities to sort of get the work that we're doing out into the public. Next slide. It's fine. We really value the inclusivity. One of our senior most members, Carla Miller, is ED&I. In England, we say ED&I. ED&I champions for equity, diversity, and inclusion, and it's something that sort of runs through all of our activities. Next slide. And we also have a dedicated officer who is our champion, who's great, Maddie Wellen. Next slide. Next slide, sorry. And so we have these activities. So in addition to sort of Winspiration Fridays activities specifically around LGBTQ, we also have things about seminars where we get into speakers who have sort of lived experience in these sort of challenging settings. Next slide. And we have these networks. So we have the Pride Network, which is people who are interested in LGBT issues. We have Mosaic for people who are interested in issues of diversity. Also, GLOW is our WIN Access is making everything that we do try to be more accessible to people with accessibility issues. Next slide. And next, sorry. And then we also stress our openness. So we want to have the tools that we make open and shareable. Of course, the FMRIB tools, FMRIB is where the FSL tools originated, and those are sort of had tremendous impact on the community. And also we are trying to make data sharing. I hate to say that we've not really gotten as far as we'd like to in data sharing. We really thought 5 years ago we'd be sharing all of our studies openly, but the informatics and the governance framework in that setting has really been a challenge. And so we're not quite there, but we do have resources where we share paradigms, which are a little bit easier governance wise. Next slide. Let's skip that. She's no longer with us, unfortunately. So yes, we have been sharing protocols, but not yet. We haven't gotten so far on the sharing. Okay. And next slide, please. And so we have a portal so there is one website where you can just find all the resources that we do have shared. Next slide. And the other thing I'm also really proud of is the fact that we really value the not traditional academic members in our team. So Stuart Clare is the head of all the radiographers and all sort of professional staff in the group. They have their own network, they have their own away days, and we really make sure that their contributions are valued and sort of felt in the organization. And that's the whole team there, and they're awesome, and they really make the work and that's done it very possible and win. I think that's everything I wanted to say. So thank you.
Okay, we appreciate the sponsor from the WIN team. Okay, so we're about to begin our sessions today for the panel. Again, I'm the moderator today. My name is Jean, and online we have a co-moderator, Abdina online. So if there are any participants online have any such suggestions or comments, please just drop messages there. Okay, it's my distinct honor and privilege to welcome all of you to this enlightening session on the open data governance and infrastructure. And we're gathered here today to delve into the fascinating world of open data, of course, and its significance in such a data-driven world. Before I proceed, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed speakers and our attentive audience for overcoming all the obstacles and joining us from near and far. So let me briefly introduce our speakers today. So I'll just follow my list here. Okay, sorry. The first one is Dr. Andrei Klemper from Czech Technical University in Prague, Czech Republic. Okay, Andrei. Okay, the second one is Dr. Brian Carnon from the Operations and Development and Neuro Hub, Montreal Neurological Institute and Hospital at McGill University from Canada. The third one, the speaker is Franco Pastilli from Department of Psychology at the University of Texas in Austin, United States. And first, we are glad to have is Alexander Bernier from the McGill University, Canada as well. As we know that open data infrastructure plays a vital role in scale forwarding to foster all the innovations and decision making. However, how to manage this open data, there are full of challenges such as data privacy, security, and all among these crucial issues that require careful consideration. So as we navigate through this evolving landscape, it is essential for us to strike a delicate balance between the openness and the safeguarding sensitive information. So today we are fortunate to have all these speakers with us in the field of data government and infrastructure. So I think we'll start to discuss these crucial topics. So the first one I need to say is, how do you think about, in your experience, how do you build a robust data sharing infrastructure in your institute or the project you are working on? Yep, so maybe start with Brian and then we will take turns. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, certainly, as you mentioned, availability, reliability are key components, because if you want something that's open and accessible to people, you want to reach a broad audience in many cases, right? So you're trying to have that, but in a way that you can not necessarily favor one particular group over another. And at least the things that come to my mind, if you look at large infrastructure like Open Neuro, for example, it's highly available. One of the other ways we have to think of is not only what do people do with the data. I'm going to pivot a little bit real quick, but what do people do with the data afterwards? It's the compute side. You're going to do some analytics on it. And then how do we make that correspondingly open access to data reliable and resilient, but also the compute side? So I think there's a number of platforms that are represented here today where we try and also bring that next step of that phase of the process together. So the compute side is one piece, but then you also have to look at, how do you build these things? Do you use national infrastructures? Do you use cloud-based infrastructures? And I think there's sometimes, not out of our own choice, I would say different nationalistic interests from our funding agencies. They say we must target specifically, certain communities to help, from a competitive edge point of view. But at the same time, we want to, as a community, be open. We want to be able to share and empower people to do those work. So I think we have to make sure that's part of our, our resource applications and so on. We try and make sure we have that equity of access as well. There's a number of ways we do it, but those are just my initial remarks.
It's very important.
Does this microphone
Yeah.
work? Brilliant. So one thing I'd maybe add to that is really picking up on the comment about national approaches. I think it's fair to say that 10, 20 years ago, regulators, policymakers, people doing bioethics were thinking about data generation within a context of a particular research institution or their country's applicable laws. And what we're seeing increasingly is that these large-scale biobanks, everything from UK Biobank to the Canadian COVID-19 Immunity Task Force, a lot of these larger infrastructures, they're being developed across many provinces, across many parts of the country, and they need to reckon with a lot of different regulatory requirements or even just approaches to drafting informed consent forms. So what you sort of end up seeing is a whole lot of data that, at least from a legal or regulatory standpoint, is all of a sudden consented for very particular things, and it's not interoperable in terms of what you can do with it. And I think that's a massive barrier to bringing together data on these singular infrastructures, where really your goal is to make it as open as possible and as accessible as possible. And by design, you're trying to build international infrastructure. So you're saying, it's not just interesting to look at a particular population within this territory. It's actually only interesting for us to look at them from across multiple territories, be it to look at environmental influences on health or influences on health across time, or different ethnicities, different population groups. The second thing that really stood out to me from your comment was this focus on openness, and specifically, I don't think we actually have a clear consensus on what the right kind of policies are for governing open data. I mean, traditionally, the way we've built biobanks and things like that is to say, we're going to control downstream access to information. We're going to have committees of people determine whether or not it's okay to make a secondary use of existing data. And that means you've got a process in place to gain access to each particularized data set or each resource, right? So you might say you're a principal investigator, you're a researcher, we have an applications process, come to us and we'll see if you can have access to our data. And increasingly, when people talk about doing analysis at scale, there's a limit at which that stops being feasible or sustainable for applicants, if not for these infrastructures. So applicants, data users just don't have the time to navigate 10 or 20 or 100 controlled access processes, ways of getting access to the data. And so increasingly, I think, as communities, we're turning to say, how can we share this data completely openly? What are the right processes? Is it a matter of consent? Is it a matter of de-identifying and anonymizing information? What's the right safeguard? And I don't think there's consensus there yet. So I think those are two of the really pressing challenges.
Yes, actually, I cannot agree more because I have here two perspectives, maybe split into two ideas or maybe opportunities, right? So I work for academia as well as for industry. I work partially for, or not half time for academia, and then my second job is half time for industry. And I have perspectives from both these sides. Definitely a question in my head, what I would like to answer every time when I should select which way I should go, is kind of, and we heard about it. Would it be cloud solution? Would it be on-premise solution? Do we use internal or international? Actually, it could be as well high performance cluster, and crucial information or question here is who would and will pay that service. I can think that if you are coming from academia, you could afford other types of service, maybe when compared to when you work for industry, and also collaboration of these two, academia versus industry organizations type, are very important. So there can be some like joint funding, again, some kind of collaboration, and this selection of infrastructure would also depend a lot, in my opinion, where you live, which country you live, what national institution type you work for, or what is the funding. So definitely, yeah, at some point we will definitely get to security and ethics and other types of aspects. But I think that for now we covered that. Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I would comment. Yeah.
I guess I'm last, so I got to comment on the comments. Great. So many good points have been raised. I think one addition is the fact that when we think about infrastructure, there's three types of infrastructure that we should think about. One is hardware, premise, non-premise, where are the systems stored, where are the data physically stored. The second is software infrastructure, which is growing to be one of the biggest, fastest growing aspects of the data. Like oftentimes, software in modern days is independent of the hardware where the data are stored and can handle different levels of storage and different types of storage. The third is it's people infrastructure. And that's often the hardest one to deal with. I mean, people dealing with software development, people dealing with accessing the data or collecting the data, and people dealing with governance aspects that were mentioned before. So what do I mean by you? I mean that in all the aspects of what we have been talking, there's always individuals that make decisions, and these decisions can affect actually access. Even though there's regulations now in place, even though that will allow access, even though there's software in place that would allow sharing, even though there's hardware in place to support the compute and the storage, oftentimes there is that person in front of you that is saying no, right? And it's blocking the access to data. And so every time we think about infrastructure, I would emphasize we need to think about these three categories, and we need to think about how to coordinate these three categories, like in terms of training of the people, in terms of developing and using the software that might be there, that has the best practices and standards for development, and then how to make that software nimble so that doesn't depend on whether the hardware you're using is a computer under the desk of your PI or is a cloud at Azure or AWS.
Thank you very much. This is very good point. You said, or you defined you, which maybe in my eyes would be broader, like maybe
Us.
you or us or all of us, and maybe we should, or we cannot forget to include their support. Like, I mean here, support, people support and technical support. This would apply to all of the infrastructure types we discussed. But you can build your own on-prem cluster infrastructure, but at some time there can be some failure of service, some type of security incident. Who will be responsible for this type of incidents? How we can recur from it, and who is the person I can ask technical question? What is the service level agreement? And this type of questions. That's very good point.
If I get, just an element, because you mentioned is scaling, like you said, ranging from the lab level all the way to like national level infrastructures, and how do you empower people to not necessarily preferentially gain, I would say, advancement for one or over another. And as you said, there's potentially if someone's doing something in their lab, there's a potentially there, and we've seen this in our particular cases, if redundancy of resources being used to do things that are done, I would say in a coordinated fashion. We've done this, I think many of us can talk about, okay, certain data sets have been downloaded multiple times and used by common people within an institution or a domain, but they're not, pulling from that same resource. So you get duplication there. And that being said, there's conversation, you don't want to say centralized such that necessarily everything's put in all in one basket. And then, as you said, you have gatekeepers which can produce sometimes maybe additional cost charges and things like that, which I think we'll get into other pieces. But so there's a balance in saying, okay, where do we want to provide a resilient service, but not at the same time have these weak points from security and other elements, because there's a lot of risk, unfortunately, depending on whether it's institutional risk for the people doing it, because we all have to, follow essentially what we know the geopolitical climate that's going on now. We have to also go by those, I would say, rules and institutions and governance elements.
I think there's several important issues has been raised. Yeah, for example, the how to increase the cooperations, for example. So the following question is, how do you think if the standardization or the protocols can help to the institutional cooperation or the cooperation between hospitals, academia, industry? Yeah. So how do you think about that? Yeah, the standard protocol.
I think there, at least when I think of protocols, I think of a number of elements. There's protocols, whether it's for, accessing the data itself. There's protocols for doing things like identity management. How do you validate the identity of someone coming in to use your service? And I think more and more we're seeing a common approach that, right down from the businesses of our universities and organizations that we can apply to our different platforms. Then I think more and more now, and I think there's conversations that are starting to see, okay, how do you have some, I would say, choice to the community in using the platforms, but at the same time, providing a similar type of outcome, meaning reproducibility is a key thing. So if we can have ways where building upon standards for defining tools, standards for even creating those tools, I won't get into the actual coding standards, but let's just say how, if I use FMI Prep, for example, how do I specify that version being used in my workflow as part of the record of use? So I think that's an element of the standardization that can be adopted by numerous platforms as a way of facilitating that collaborative element and make it easier for people to have some, I would say, flow in between different projects, but at the same time, speak the same language.
So how about Franco? Do you have any experience on this?
Can you repeat the question for me?
Do you think about the general standardization or protocol establishment could help the cooperation, or there should be some flexibilities like this? Yeah, from your experience.
No, I think standardization is key, and this community has been working really hard and really well on standardizing and providing standardization at the level of software specifications and standardization of data. I think what we might want to do next is start working on standardization across platforms, which will involve governance, which will involve, shaking hands between, documents that are, maybe specified in different ways in different countries because of the different laws. We are actually working on this. We have a project that starts this summer from the Wellcome Trust. It's going to be a 3-year project to work on global data sharing across countries. We are involving Latin America and North America, Europe, and Africa. There's partners in multiple countries in each one of these regions. We actually have an open call for ambassadors. We're looking for individuals that can help us with the legal aspects for the governance, the ethicals, and the technological aspects. We have a little bit of money to support a little bit of work. But we think it's the next frontier in a certain way. When I started before saying people are key, it's because I think I'm a half full glass type of person, and I think we have all the technology and all the resources to scale up our science, just like companies are doing. And what's hindering that process are people, in the sense that not that we're bad, but because we need to grow as a culture, and we need to grow the infrastructure that help the people get there. Right. So I think I'm looking at the young folks in the room, and the hope is in you guys. And as we age, we get out obsoletely here, and we might bring it a little bit more hindering, but you can do it. And but one thing that we need to do next is like, how do we scale in an ethical and way globally? so that we get the data sets where they can be and need to be for the next generation of science. Standardization is key for all this, but not just the data, not just the software. We need to standardize the thinking. It's a weird way to say that, but we need to align all our minds to the fact that this has got to happen if we want to break that box.
Yeah, yeah. Is there any comments or questions from the audience?
Just want to emphasize the standardization aspect. It takes too much time and coordination efforts and people willing to accept compromise to get to the place where, for instance, this is, or get to the place where you accept that, okay, this is the file format that we're using, and it's not the greatest one in the world, that's the one we're using. And it's great to have, I'm just little plug for the NCF in that space, because they have a process for vetting by the community standards. And I think that vetting process is really the independent, or at least larger communities saying, hey, that's a good standard, because not only the developers of that standard are using it, not only it has enough users and things like that, and we vet for that. I think that is one space where I think we can collectively get better and support in this kind of organization.
Yeah, thank you. Sure. Can you state your name and where you're from? Yeah.
Maybe just a follow question to Franco. It's great to hear about that I would say that cross boundary. Just out of curiosity, since I've at least been learning more, at least as part of my activities, not directly involved in it, but are any First Peoples or Indigenous groups involved as communities of participation within the regions you've talked about?
Yeah, very interesting. The ambassador program is where these people can be involved, and we have for each country we have individuals that are leading the area that are indigenous for as much as they can be. They're professors in universities, so and their aspect of diversity. But for Canada and the US, where we don't yet have individuals, and we have actually part of the program is specifically for individuals with lived experiences, because we are trying to address the needs of the community, because sometimes how does many times the process goes that there are some laws and there are some documents and there's standards and there's software. Everything we write, it's in the benefit of society, but then there's someone that is legally responsible for some decisions, and then things get blocked. So I think the partnering with the ultimate beneficiaries of what we do would be one way to make sure that we do something that is fair in the sense of the fair principles, not necessarily open, because open has some, that word, we love it. And at the same time, I hope it drops as soon as just open science just becomes science, and we just do it in a fair way. But at this point, it will start in August next week, technically. So we're just opening up. We don't have a website yet, and please reach out to me and to Kim. If Kim, do you want to raise your hand? Kim Ray. So she's the director for strategy and engagement for the new project for the next 3 years. And but we're reaching out. We're trying to reach out, especially in North America. Yeah.
I'd just maybe add something to that comment, Franco, which I think was excellent. I think one area, at least, and I'm not a technical person at all, so I'm just around these conversations. I'm not part of them. But one area that's coming into vogue and into the public eye a lot is how to meaningfully engage, communities that are either, the subjects of research or that are participating in research in the design, of course, of everything from how the data is collected, how the data is recorded, and then into the downstream governance. And I know a lot of international infrastructures from the Human Cell Atlas, Global Alliance, have been looking at things like how to record data about, for instance, diversity, and this can be ancestral diversity in the omics space. This can be, population self-identification or group self-identification, just writ large, generally from a demographic standpoint. But to me, it's an area where there doesn't seem to be a lot of consensus yet, and especially for the kinds of identifiers that are sort of at that intersection between being socially constructed or constructed by a community and sort of having also implications in terms of whether it's if you're looking at things like ancestry in genomics. And this is not a space I know well at all, so I'm just trying to relate conversation I've been adjacent to, but really there's difficulty in finding a way to do it that different communities can really rally around and agree on, whilst also having these serve as useful metrics in practical settings. Another quick thing that I'd add to that is I know there's been increasing success in engaging with communities in the design of infrastructures. I know, for instance, in Canada, both the Red River Métis community and then the First Nations Information Governance Center have sort of independently, been, able to sort of interact with scientists, with researchers in helping them at least find the right members of individual specific communities to engage with in developing data governance processes. But I think ultimately, for now, these are Band-Aid solutions to a much bigger issue. And, this bigger issue is building capacity to lead and coordinate research within, communities that are participating. So especially within the Global South and outside of our own communities, that ultimately, designing standards and metrics to make things more participatory is a Band-Aid solution to really develop, ensuring that, research capacity and infrastructure develops within communities that are performing that research. And the other totally unrelated thing that I would say very quickly is that, I think standardization of governance is incredibly important. We can't do it without acknowledging that, there are many meaningful policy differences in distinct communities that are there because people have different preferences about how information can be used. So the European Union, the United States have staked very different claims about what's acceptable in terms of downstream data use, right? The Europeans hew much closer to a privacy preserving approach, to an approach that gives individuals strong informational rights of controlling the use of their information. And some of these, we talk about standardization, but some of these distinctions are not accidental, right? There are hard limits in what you can do with information in different contexts because communities choose those preferences. I think the key is to make sure that as much as we can standardize and streamline technical processes, but also governance processes, how we make decisions about who can use information, standardizing those where there's no real underlying policy difference is key, in the sense that it's wasteful and it actually precludes researchers from gaining access to information that could be leveraged to do pro-social research, where different policy processes simply proliferate everywhere because everyone's just kind of designed their own thing, not because there's an underlying policy difference. Those are just the two things that came to my mind.
May I?
Yeah, please go ahead. Oh, I see you have a hand, but yeah.
Yeah, I would just really like to comment on 2 points of your statements. I totally agree. Standardization is a very important point. And the process of standardization is a little bit chaotic, I would say. So I'm involved in some of the, let's say, US initiatives around BITS, for example. Yeah, and then I'm at the same time involved in the development of the German national data infrastructure. And I can see these are totally decoupled processes. Yeah? And if you're lucky, there will be people like me who basically live in both communities, but there's no coordination across the worldwide coordination, across initiatives. This is only on the state level. On the then we have the level of the communities and in which fields people. This is something, for example, I find interesting because, for example, the genetics people, they now realize that they invented data sharing very early with their Bermuda principles, but they now realize that they cannot use the data. Yeah? And that they have to basically set it up again. And so this is something where I also think we need way more coordination across fields than we currently have. I mean, I'm totally happy and we already have something going on. And the third thing is, I just want to mention that. Yes, the GDPR puts personal protection or protection of personal information, the individual at the center, but it's a misconception, the idea that the GDPR would provide the individual a different level of protection than, for example, HIPAA. And the safe harbor method is a perfect method to align those two regulation spaces with each other. So it is not correct that we are completely different from each other. And the other important thing is GDPR is a role model for the privacy protection laws all over the world. It's more than 150 states that now, meanwhile, implemented privacy protection laws that at least share some commonalities with GDPR.
So may I first say something that is more organizational than content-wise. If people want to ask a short question, it's totally fine if you do it from the audience. But something like what you're saying now is maybe also relevant for people online or people watching the recording. Okay. Can you please come up to the stage and speak in a mic? Otherwise, it would not be recorded. But thanks.
So if I might make one really quick response to that, and then we could shuffle along. So with regard to the oh yes, okay, that's a great. So yeah, my apologies to the online audience. We received two comments. The first one was essentially, or sorry, I guess the second one rather was essentially, if you will, stating that there's not necessarily so great a policy difference between what can be done under different regulatory requirements, and that actually, it's important to find pathways to align things like GDPR compliance and HIPAA compliance. Basically, find practical implementations of both that look like one another. And then the earlier comment was more about essentially starting, from the get-go to standardize approaches across different communities in a way that's both, making sure that, for instance, neuroscience, genomics, so on and so forth, speak to one another, but also that the data that these generate and share are really meaningfully usable. I think that gets to the essence of what you were saying. One of the really quick responses I'd make to that, and I think there was a lot of content in there, but very quickly, is that I think that one thing that we're seeing is that all of our regulatory approaches right now instruct organizations to balance things like equitable downstream use versus risk to the individual. So they have a set of principles. Some of them have specific technical requirements, get rid of this identifier, get rid of that identifier. But by and large, they tell organizations balance people's rights, and we, the regulator, will come and tell you whether what you did was all right. I think one of the challenges in that regulatory design, and it's across all the laws without singling anyone out, is that it doesn't incentivize the bottom-up development of different ways of approaching governance and then letting communities elect one or the other, in the sense that because this is a top-down regulatory construction where you're told, look, balance these principles and we'll tell you after the fact whether you did a good job, it encourages conservatism in data sharing, conservatism in downstream data use. None of the principles in there are bad. The principles are good. But this approach of saying, the regulated party, proposes and the regulator disposes, means that organizations will quite legitimately, be afraid of non-compliance. And then they will maybe be less experimental in their data sharing. I think that, taking our current approaches and giving more safe havens, safe harbors for organizations that try and do a good job would probably be very effective. Microphone's right here.
Just come forward.
There's like 4 of them.
All right. I just had one small comment about the GDPR and the so HIPAA, for example. And while some of the principles I feel are the same or similar, the scope is very different. HIPAA is much more constrained. The GDPR is much more general. The idea of safe harbor. I mean, safe harbor was shut down by the CJEU in 2015. That led to what was it? Privacy Shield. That was shut down again. Recently, there's been another agreement that that was sort of knocked out by the Commission to again legally share data with the US. That's being appealed, not appealed, challenged by EU data privacy groups. I'm not saying that it's completely incompatible, but you are right. I think that these top-down approaches where regulators will then tell you kind of whether you've done a good job pushes like a more conservative and understandably more conservative approach. No one wants to end up in trouble. So I still think that there is quite a way to go to sort of deal with these issues. Yeah.
Very briefly, short answer on that. Very briefly. Okay, it is correct that the adequacy decision was taken back, but that was part of the because of the Patriot Act, not because of the safe harbor method.
Yeah. Okay. Admittedly, yeah, you're right. However, we still ultimately have these issues that we need to deal with.
Sure. Yeah. State your name and where.
So Michael Dayan from Campus Biotech in Geneva. So it's a very interesting discussion, and I was wondering practically what can be done now to share data, because what constitutes identifiable information? For example, you can do defacing, but there are some refacing approaches. You have brain fingerprinting, according to which just a functional MRI may be enough to re-identify the individual. So it seems that different camps, not sure, some very conservative, saying you should do the analysis on site and you can share secondary inputs to do more like mega analysis versus meta analysis, but you can lose a lot of statistical power. So I was wondering now, is there a consensus maybe from some great initiative like cross-border data sharing on what is acceptable, what seems acceptable in terms of data sharing?
So it's complicated. That's the answer. So we've been working on some documents that, so we're working toward building a framework for data sharing, a governance across countries. The process would probably take a couple of years, okay? We've been analyzing actually Australia and US laws in the context of the platform I lead, Brain Life. This is a project now, another project I'm mentioning by the Kavli Foundation. We've been working on how to share data between the US and Australia, and we're working on how to share data between France and the US. And this is very small scope, but it's a start, it's a pilot to learn what are the regulations. For example, when we started talking to some of my collaborators in Australia, it looked like nothing could be shared, right? Because the Australian law of privacy are really strict, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that what turns out wasn't true. It was a misconception because these laws are scary because there's been this avalanche of response to the GDPR, which probably has been a response to the fact that the US companies have been, sucking data everywhere, a little bit everywhere in the world, and with problems, that we have seen in the elections a few years ago and all around, right? So it's been all these wave of events that go beyond science that are limiting science. And now we have to deal with them, but there's a way to navigate. The goal is to try to identify general frameworks and then clarify the framework for each instance. I think there's going to have some adaptation of the general frameworks that will depend on the different countries that are working on. So do we have a solution now? No, but will we have a solution? I hope so. Ultimately, I think we probably need to develop something like what we have in genomics, which is alliances that will help us lobby, will help us broker, will help us manage these frameworks, and ultimately bring the scientist voice where it needs to be, because, you know, otherwise we're going to be overwhelmed by, you know, other types of interests, such as, you know, protections of businesses, protections of legal aspect due to medical purposes, which is related to completely different billing instead of being science, right? And so basically building the right people infrastructure, again, it's probably very, very important now to make sure that we do. But we're working on documents, and hopefully we'll work with Canada. Seeing that some of the folks in Canada have already been done a lot of good work on this, and we'll work with the other countries. I see many ways, so I stop, and I don't know if someone of the panelists wants to, but Tom.
Okay, I will then continue.
Hello. Yeah, thanks for that, for the discussion. Tom Johnston, Swinburne University, and the National Imaging Facility in Australia. It strikes me that one common thing or problem, if you like, that's being made apparent here is one of, you might even think of it as non-stationarity. We're dealing with regulatory environment, which is different, very different across different regimes, different countries, different settings. But also one that's changing, and it's likely to change even more quickly, one might anticipate, with the rise of AI technologies and the, you know, sometimes knee-jerk reactions of politicians against fears, but also sometimes legitimate concerns about privacy. So I think the word that was used earlier today in the talk was nimble, and it seems to me that standards and procedures for sharing data, both at a governance level, but also from a practical infrastructure level, have to be nimble, because we're going to have to change very quickly and be able to respond to changes. Franca was just mentioning Australia. We just got an email, or we just got a contract from the Australian government, effectively, saying that we were going to have to ask for permission individually for any data that we wanted to share overseas, which is clearly an overstep by that department. And, you know, hopefully we're going to get that changed. But it just highlights the fact that if we adopt solutions that are quite monolithic, large, take a long time to implement, then quite frankly, we're not going to be able to have that nimbleness and that flexibility that we need. So I'm wondering what the panel might think about how we address that problem.
About the flexibilities. Yeah.
Maybe, Jean, can I first start with the main discussion and main track and react to what I heard so far? This is great. This is a great point. We can get to that later. And I would like to also contribute to the previous topic and the previous question. I would like to raise three main topics. I consider myself as technician or analyst, or the person who implements computer programs and so on. At the same time, I'm an engineer, so I will take it from a more technical perspective, and I will comment on standardization. I will give you one example from what I'm seeing right now a lot. Then I really like what that you mentioned, open data and the definition itself. What does that actually mean, and how should we treat it and define that? And I forgot the last one, so let's start with these two. Standardization of the pipelines and standardization of data. Yes, here at this conference, we all know, we are all reading a lot of interesting posters, attending lectures and talks. We have here a lot of topics related to large-scale analysis, large-scale neuroimaging, and so on. A lot of people work with UK Biobank data. At the same time, I'm seeing more and more federated learning solutions and technologies. So large-scale here, that's the point. And I will provide the example of standardization of such process. I think we've already touched upon that. I mean, how to actually load, read, and access data at scale. I can imagine a situation that when we work for a small lab, typically we can have cohort of 20 participants, something like that. But if we scale this up, we can go up to now 500K participants in the UK Biobank study, or for neuroimaging, let's say 100K, how we should load and actually download that data. The infrastructure is critical here. Also the collaboration point of view. So my example is, okay, when I'm a researcher, what I can do to download data? Should I need, every time I create a project, should I need to download terabytes, gigabytes, terabytes, maybe even petabytes of data to some storage? If so, how should I do that? You know, that's the point I would like to raise here, maybe for the upcoming discussion during poster session outside of this room later. Second, open data. This is kind of related. Let's bridge these two topics together. And here I would like to raise that, okay, what is the definition? Open data. Is this like, do we consider completely open data? I mean, something GitHub based, something available via university department website? Or at the same point, do we still consider, let's say, again, UK Biobank data as open? Yes, in my eyes, it is. It's open worldwide, but there is the step that you will need to first apply for the data, prepare some application ID, prepare some documentation, and ask for the data, and finally or eventually pay some amount. And the last point, I forgot that, so someone can continue. Sorry. We can get later.
Yeah, there's two questions in the app. Well, there's many questions in the app. So first of all, thanks for everyone. But there's two questions that are related to what you're saying that I would like to bring up. And that is what your thoughts are on really long-term storage of data, not for the next 10 years, but next decades, and the increasing amount of data we are collecting. And a suggestion here in the app, or a question is, do we need to save all the raw data and make that available? Or would it be an option to share pre-processed data just to save data space? So I think those two questions are highly relevant to what you said, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
So this is likely question primarily for me, right?
No.
Sorry. I can possibly start, or you can.
No, I'll go in reverse order. I think the last part, you emphasized, gave everyone sharing pre-processed data. One of the things, and this will touch upon the UK Biobank that was mentioned. I have all other questions and comments with regard to how UK Biobank currently shares some of their data, but within the sharing that we've done at our institution, following the data use agreements that we have with the UK Biobank, we actually, my colleagues, we've gone through and actually defined what common pre-processings are of desired interest to the community. So that way, first of all, we only have the data on our storage systems without duplicating unnecessarily those original source files. And we also avoid the duplication of effort and computational resource being used to create those pre-processings, whether it's, in our case, we've done track-to-flow, we're in the midst of FMI prep, we've done Civit. So those are, we make available within the definition of our data use agreement, and we try and economize that way to at least be, efficient in how we access the data. So I think those are benefits of doing it. Now the question is, how central do you make this? You can say, okay, what is the sphere? Is it national? Is it international? Is it go cloud-based? Because then there's pros and cons to consolidate with sometimes with a commercial enterprise, where sometimes there's ingress and egress charges. Whereas our various regions have invested heavily into national systems, at least in Canada, and we're being strongly mandated by our funding agencies to make use of those resources. So there's a balance there. There's no answer, but at least in our case, we're trying at least be as efficient as possible in our use of to do those things like pre-processing.
Data ages just like humans. Now, do we know how much it ages? Not yet. I think one hint is that it ages depending on the value that it has now. Like very high quality data today might age slower than not great data today, right? Unique type of data, but it does age. And we have to establish as a community that, that slope, right? We need to figure out this is answering the question online, right? What do we need to do? For how long do we need to preserve data? And I think that the preservation of data has to be scaled by the process of aging of data. So depending on the quality, uniqueness of the data, we're talking about maybe 10 years, or we're talking about more than 10 years. I have colleagues in neuroscience that have these unique electron microscopy data that they've been using they tell me, like over 20 years, right? And that's because it's unique. It's so hard to get, and there's so many interesting things you can look at in those images. But given, for example, the advance in technology that we're seeing in neuroimaging data, imagine now going back to 15 years and getting some images from 15 years. It's probably not high value, especially because of the frameworks we were using in terms of tasks and the frameworks we were using in terms of the type of questions we were asking. So no, we don't have to store all the data forever. We can identify as a community parameters by which data can be purged. That's my hint.
In my opinion, it depends. Which type of data use, if raw data or preprocessed. It depends on researcher use case and on the aspect how rapidly you would like to deliver some results, right? If your research project is really to take care about all the details of data processing, I would start with raw data. But on the other hand, if I really need to deliver something either to the market or as a research academia project, I can start with something preprocessed, something on which quality standardization and protocols has been done. For example, in terms of quality, if it's, for example, UK Biobank data. And so the use case here plays a really role. Yeah.
And just make a last remark. I think then once that longevity based upon the quality of the data, utility of the data, then I think at least we're seeing this, at least nationally in Canada. I don't know about the other countries, but it'd be good to see what their situations are. We also have to determine, okay, what are the mechanisms for delivering upon that lifetime? When I say lifetime, doesn't mean permanency, but as you said, delivering on that lifetime. So that for the longest time, at least in Canada, has been a nebulous thing. We'll say, well, we'll deal with it in the future. Well, that future is coming now, particularly in our tri-agencies. So we have the social sciences, the medical, and the natural sciences saying, well, everyone has to have a data management plan. We have to then correspondingly back that up with, in terms of, infrastructure, people infrastructure, software infrastructure, to, adhere to what we feel as a community best practices for that particular data. And it's emerging area for at least us.
Yeah. So because of the time constraint, time flies very quickly, but we will soon have the table talk in like 15 minutes. So finally, I will address the last questions for this panel session. So from your experience and what you have been working on, how should we keep this discussion going on about when it comes to open infrastructure and open data governance? Because from the questions raised above, we know that for data users' point of view, it's very different from the people that is setting all the strategies and the regulations. So there are lots of things going on. So if you want to keep this discussion going on, what could be the key issues when it comes to open infrastructure that you would suggest?
For me, in one sentence, building more communities and maintain communities. Not in general, but in this case, more specifically for neuroimaging community. Yeah.
I'd say one really quick thing, and that's that we have a lot of policy people at the table determining what can be done with data, coming up with principles, approaches. That's really important, but it's been done pretty well. And I think that, you know, even if we look at the laws that we're writing right now, they give us lots of principles to work with. I think it's a misconception to say that, you know, omics and science communities don't know that it's important to balance, you know, privacy and openness. We have those incentives already. I think the important thing to do is to bring technical people to the table, and, you know, members of affected communities to the table to talk about real world meaningful trade-offs, you know, trade-offs between keeping your data high quality and usable versus limiting identifiability, trade-offs between sharing it in a closed community and really maximizing impact by just sharing it, you know, open the floodgates. I think that's the discussion that needs to happen going forward. It's getting people together to talk about real world compromises and making decisions between them.
You know, I think sometimes in similar conversations, but maybe in other areas where we try and, you know, say, how do we make progress? And I don't know if this is a viable one, but, you know, setting some example use cases that we could at least have a definition of, you know, how we would handle certain situations as just as an exemplar that we could, you know, try and work out, as you said, some of the questions that are there and mechanics. It may not apply to every situation, but at least then you're dealing with something more concrete in the discussion to try and tangibly work, as you said, from the policy down through the technical.
So yeah, I think I'm hearing again people, right? So that people infrastructure is the key here. So you guys engaging and not thinking that governance issues are like secondary. They're actually going to limit what you can do. They already are more than you realize. You know, you're just going to have your hands on the data sets you can see and collect locally, but that's not the type of science that is going to go the biggest bang for the buck. And so that in terms of community and within human brain mapping, I would love to see more of this conversation out of this room. I would like to see the keynotes come out of this room. I would like to see more of the conversation that are happening in terms of standardizations and software out of this room. We're speaking a little bit too much to ourselves, right? So how do we do that? How do we engage the leadership so that these topics that are really important get out of the room, right? So and it's people, right? So it's us, you know, getting involved and reach out to the posters that are not the posters that you see. Reach out to the colleagues that are not the colleagues that you have a very pleasant chat with because they already understand what this is. And this is something maybe before I spoke to the young ones, now I'm speaking to the old ones. Right? This is not something I can do. This is not something young people can do. This is something that the one with the gray hair can push.
These are indeed inspiring discussions. So please stay with us because there are still several key concepts when it comes to open infrastructure, such as security, privacy, and experience using the cloud platform, etc. So please stay with us. We will, the next section about the table talk will start in 15 minutes, and it will be moderated by my colleague Andrea and Neil. Okay, so let's give a round of applause to our speakers today. Okay, we'll be right back. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing the questions into attention. So it seemed like there was
about the initiative. Please contact Ben Busby.
Yeah.
Can you guide us in touch? Let me see.
Okay.
Shall I send you an email, Ben?
Yes.
So what's your? Okay, let me write Ben.
And train them on science practices because it's online and Busby. We don't want people to share.
that's the first step, and everything's blocked from there.
Exactly.
Have you involved in the bigger policies that I thought?
But I worked both for which is O Flantier. Yes.
And that might be a benefit to say, okay, you know, how can we teach?
Yes.
Well, not teach, but just, you know, recommend things.
Yeah, interconnected.
Ethics board.